Yeah, we're live now, Chair.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Thursday, the 3rd of December 2020, and just after 10 o'clock. We are holding this meeting virtual. And if I could ask if everyone could stay on mute unless you're presenting or unless you have a question to ask. And if you do have a question, please raise your hand and I'll point that out accordingly. So we'll start with item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Rinna Thompson and John Sanderson, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any from the floor? Okay, item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If we go through those, do we have any points of accuracy or any items to raise from those minutes? Can we agree those minutes? Yeah. Thank you. Move on to item 3, disclosures of members' interests. Do we have anything to declare on that, please? No. And we'll move on to item 4, the forward plan of key decisions.
The forward plan's there for members to, just for information for members to note. There'll be a number of stuff in the new year come onto the forward plan for decisions from facts, but they'll be there on the January version.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay. Yeah. So as we move on to the reports, I'm going to just point out we need to just change a few things around with regards to the agenda. The free school meals will be now, we're going to take that report later on just because of officer availability. So we're going to start with item 5.2, the care proceedings and public law outline annual report on progression. I'm going to hand that over to Graham, who's going to present that report, please.
Good morning, everyone. This report is further to previous reports that we've presented to facts relating to care proceedings and the timeliness of care proceedings for Northumberland. But this one particularly is focusing on the impact of COVID in terms of children who are before the court in care proceedings. And there have been, as you'll see from the report, quite significant delays for the court being able to progress children who are going through the court process. And as you can see, there were some challenges as well to the process for court hearings. We started off not being able to undertake very few of those court proceedings, concerns about the fairness and the process for all the participants. But the updated guidance was presented by the nationally by the President, basically coming to use hybrid meetings where parents would be able to attend court with the solicitors, with the judge, so there could be some face-to-face contact. The concerns being that this is such a stressful and difficult process for all concerned, but particularly for parents, that the fairness of the process for them was seen to be as helpful as possible. But the ability of the courts to be able to set these processes up in a timely way has and continues to be a challenge. But we are currently in a position where the courts are able to do hybrid hearings for some of the children for whom there have been the highest delays or the most significant concerns. Now, for Northumberland, the point at which we went into COVID, we had higher numbers of children in care proceedings than we've had previously. Our decision making around children going into care proceedings is robust. That was checked and inspected by Ofsted at the start of this calendar year, and it's a process we continue to audit. We are satisfied that our decision making is robust, looking for all alternatives to care or care proceedings that can be safely met for children. So when we do enter care and enter court proceedings particularly, we are of the view that that is the best and most appropriate way of meeting the needs for the child and for their safety. Now, as we've gone through as the hybrid hearings have commenced, we have been able to prioritise and move through some of the children for whom we are most concerned and for whom it is a priority move on with those. However, there do remain, given that we have a high number of children in care proceedings at the moment, still some who are subject to delay. And this is reflected in our overall numbers of our children in care, which are higher than they have been. They've plateaued at around 445 children. That is significantly higher than they have been. But we are starting to see some moves on with the court arena. One of the other challenges as part of this, in order to move work on, is being able to set up face-to-face contact with families. So when families are subject to care proceedings, we have a duty and we try and arrange levels of contact, family time between families and their parents to make sure they maintain the relationships, for us to do further assessment work or other people to see that. That has been a challenge through COVID, and we have managed to move forward through thorough risk assessments to move forward again for those priority children to start undertaking face-to-face contact. But similarly, that has been a challenge, but we're also moving forward on that. So overall, there have been delays and continue to be some delays. We are moving forward with those children where we can. We are prioritising the children for whom we have the most delay for the court to consider. And further to that, we're also participating in steering group work regionally, which will contribute nationally to how we can progress more effectively the care proceedings in the current circumstances. I think I've covered the main issues there, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any questions regarding that, please? Yes, Alan.
Yeah, I noticed in the conclusion there, this first sentence, some children have experienced delay as a result of COVID-19 restrictions. But if you go back up to point 13, if my calculations are right, then you've got 9 children that have had a delay with a severe impact. What exactly does severe impact mean, and are those children potentially at risk?
No, the children won't be. If we were, the court have heard hearings. So, for example, if I go to start, if we are significantly concerned and make an application to court for a child we are concerned about, the court will hear those. So the children who are within the care proceedings will be in safe places that are monitored and worked with. The risks and the impact for those children particularly is moving on to their long-term or their permanent placement. So they'll be in situations of interim.
Severe impact just means they haven't been able to be moved on.
Yes, it's primarily the main reason of the impact. The delay for them in being in work would be temporary placement, or basically not achieving the stability in the long-term placement for them where their needs will be met. It won't be that they are at risk of significant harm at the point at which they are in care proceedings, because one of the judgments the courts will make will be around the interim safety for those children whilst assessments work is being undertaken or alternatives are being considered.
Right. And do you feel 9 is a high number for those children to be at that stage?
Well, I think overall, our numbers, as I said before, are higher than they have been in the court proceedings currently. But I think in terms of the percentages there, as the report indicates, we're no different to other people and what we do, other regional partners. But equally, what we do is we will try and make sure the court are fully aware of the children for whom we have the most concern in terms of wanting to move them on quickly. And they do try and consider that in their timetabling.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Any more questions, please?
Chair, could I just raise one issue? Sorry. It's just to clarify the bit about the fact that we've got significantly higher numbers of children within our looked after system than we've previously had. I just want to quantify that to say that regionally we are still the second lowest local authority of children per 10,000 population. So although our numbers are higher than they have previously been, our performance is still better. It's still pretty solid within the region, and we're the second lowest.
I'm pleased that you pointed that out. Wayne, you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's actually on point 20, which is on page 6 of the report, and it references about using new measures to do assessments. That's the questioning I'm interested in, is on those new measures around how assessments are done given COVID. It's a two-pronged question. One is, are there any of those things that you think will stay, when we get through COVID. So, you know, some things which actually have really worked and probably quite beneficial. And the second thing is, are you as confident as you can be that those new assessment measures, things aren't being hidden that we don't know about? It's what you don't know that you don't know.
Sure.
In effect,
Sure.
it's I guess the surety that you feel using the current systems, that everything that could be done has been done to mitigate anything which could be hidden or undisclosed.
Yeah, okay. If I deal with that in two answers, Wayne. I mean, the first point about the creative ways of undertaking assessments and what we might learn from that. One of the things we've set up is a task and finish group, which is currently working through looking at all the range of learning and methods that we have employed during the pandemic to work with and link with families and with children. And we're reviewing those to see which of those have worked and which could be part of business as usual going forward. So there have been a range of creative ways we've engaged with children. This is more generally, not just in court proceedings, and families using online resources. But similarly, we've been doing a range of preventative work through our early help and our youth and other services, as well as our social work services, to maintain contact with families. In terms of the conduct of assessments, particularly here, it has been a mix of virtual and face-to-face. So again, for reassurance, colleagues, social workers have been continuing to have face-to-face contacts and visits to families throughout the pandemic. They've been fully risk assessed with clear guidance for staff using PPE where necessary, social distancing, all those measures. But throughout the period of the pandemic, social workers have continued to have face-to-face contacts with children and families, supplemented by virtual methods. And as we speak at the moment, the vast majority of our social work visits are being undertaken face-to-face. Similarly, our visits through our early help services also are being risk assessed, but there are face-to-face works with those and our youth service in terms of detached work. So just again, for reassurance, it hasn't been done, the assessments aren't being done wholly virtually, because the risks would be too great. We would need to see and get the nuances and subtleties of the assessments through the face-to-face work, but supplemented by rather than replaced by. Does that answer both the points, Wayne?
Yeah, it does. And the one thing I'm really pleased about is that you're looking to see if some of these methods of working can be carried forward, and that's a really, really good thing. Because if that can subsequently then speed things up, once the courts are back and running, then we're going to be, you know, have had something positive coming out of this. So well done.
Thank you.
Scott Dickinson.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Graham, for that. Part of my concern was around the mix between face-to-face visiting and virtual, because obviously, you know, there are a proportion of things that you could simply not see via virtual. So that's really reassuring that there's a proportion of that continuing in terms of the face-to-face delivery, and we've managed to do that in a safe way, because I think that is really, really important, especially for some of the most vulnerable families and children that could potentially become at risk by only having a virtual assessment, if you see what I mean. So I'm pleased that's not happening. The other thing I wanted to pick up on was around point 16, where we're referring to, obviously, like hospitals and everything else, there's been a restriction on kind of face-to-face visiting and contact between families and children, which can obviously be quite distressing for both the family and the child. And I'm just wondering, obviously that refers to March and July, so I'm wondering where we are with that now in terms of bringing something slightly back online, or whether we're still online, so to speak.
No, well, we have introduced face-to-face contact for families within the court proceedings, particularly who are a priority and who are most concerned or want to try and move forward. There is one other where we do have face-to-face contact, which is a very sensitive and difficult issue, where we have managed to move children on to adoption, or the plan has been agreed that they can have a final face-to-face contact with their birth family in terms of that. And clearly that is a very difficult and emotional time, but very important for the family and the child for us to have conducted that as sensitively as possible. And that is one of those that we have prioritised as a face-to-face contact, where families are able and willing and want to to do that. I would say we've also managed to, there's a number of our care proceedings have got face-to-face contact as part of the work and the assessments to help support our final position to the court and the conclusions through the court. It does remain, we continue to develop it. So for example, we're also looking to use wider venues where we can undertake the contact face to face. Clearly over summer, it was easier to do that in outdoor settings, and it's become more of a challenge as the winters come in. So we are looking at other settings where we can use, which are COVID safe, which we've done risk assessments. And the complexity of that meeting is the risk assessments with the family, with the child, with the carers, with the setting, with the staff who would be undertaking supervising. So it is a complicated process to make sure we get that right, but we are moving it forward as far as we are able to.
Thanks, Graham. That's really reassuring.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Do we have any more questions on this report, please?
Mark, sorry, Chair, could I just use this very selfishly as an opportunity just to say a huge thank you to our social work and our frontline staff, because actually lots of other professions are thanked formally, nursing staff, teachers, school staff, etc. But it's not often that I get an opportunity to be able to say a huge thank you to the staff who've worked at the front line throughout the whole of this process. Social workers do a very, very difficult job, and the support staff that assist with them and our residential social workers have remained at work and you know, as Graham has already indicated, visiting directly, having face-to-face contact with families during this really difficult time. So I just wanted that opportunity to say thank you to them all, because it's much appreciated, because they don't often get that accolade and that recognition. So selfishly, I just want to use that chance.
Yeah, most definitely, completely agree. So the recommendations are that the committee notes the content of the report, and number 2, identifies any areas for further scrutiny. So are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 6, the report of the independent chair of the Nssp. And we'll hand that over to Paula, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring the Safeguarding Partnerships report to yourselves. So this is the first annual report, actually, of the new arrangements, which previously, as many of you recall, we were the local safeguarding board, and the most recent legislation has dissolved safeguarding boards, essentially. And what's happened, and that was set out in Working Together 2018. So the new arrangements are now that the responsibility for, and statutory responsibility for maintaining safeguarding is held by the 3 safeguarding partners, as they're called, one of which is the local authority, Children's Services in particular, the CCG and the police. So responsibility now lies with those 3 safeguarding partners. There are obviously other agencies involved because they are a really important part of the whole safeguarding system, and they're known as relevant agencies. And they are, as you might expect, are the hospital trusts and the voluntary organisations with duties of care to safeguard children. And so they continue to contribute to the system in Northumberland. So this report, which is an unusually annual report in that it's from April 2019 to September 2020, is to cover that period of time. And this annual report sets out those new arrangements, which you'll have seen in the introduction. In many ways, the duties and responsibilities haven't changed in themselves, because we still have a responsibility to assure the safeguarding process across the partnership, and make sure that any local practice serious case reviews are undertaken, and that learning from those reviews take place, and to measure or assess, monitor, measure our effectiveness and impact of these arrangements and the progress. We also have a responsibility to set out learning where things haven't gone as well as we would want them to, and to make sure, you know, that we take account of that and going forward. Just to say a word about COVID, which is a word that's hard to avoid now, that of course we would have met previously, the strategic partnership would have met in real life. That's been going on virtually, and because it's a strategic partnership, actually it hasn't presented in that sense too many difficulties for us. But it's been our priority to, over since March, it's been our priority to hold agencies to account for their safeguarding practice, and to make sure, within the constraints that there have been, that we gain assurances from our partners that children and young people are kept safe. So we've been, when this first started, we were actually holding weekly multi-agency meetings. We were asking partners to provide assurances. We kept a COVID-specific score sheet so that we could monitor issues like some of the issues that Graham mentioned earlier around, you know, were our numbers of looked after children going up? Were they going down? More of a concern, actually. And were we missing things? So we were actually asking partners to present that information, which they did. And one of the things I think that was helpful and interesting, and is something that we might want to think about going forward, we joined it up with our adult safeguarding partnership, and it actually worked quite well. So at the moment they sit very separately, and it worked well when we held things together because there's such a lot of commonalities. So we also we designed a risk log which was again very COVID specific. So that was some of the work that we did during this period. We've now we then, by I think probably about July, August, went back to bi-monthly meetings with subgroups, which are the sort of, if you like, the engines of the partnership, undertaking their duties remotely. So one of the things that we need to do was to set out what we've achieved. We have a set of priorities that we focus on. There's lots of things that need to be done, but we have to set out some priorities, which we did. There's quite a few achievements, I think, which is sort of again set out in the report. We've implemented the new arrangements, which we had to do legally, and they're now in place. We've strengthened our regional work through the early adopter programme, which is a Tyne and Wear partnership, the aim of which is to really gain the benefits of working together regionally, and the economies of scale that might bring, while still focusing very much on the local. And in fact, COVID really did make us focus on Northumberland, which it was you know, we needed to do at that time. However, we have made some progress, and will continue to work regionally with our colleagues around benchmarking, shared policies and procedures, those sorts of things. We've undertaken a number of multi-agency audits, which are very helpful in terms of gaining assurance, but also driving continual improvements. So for example, working with fathers, that's been one of our big priorities. And we feel that we've really made some progress with that now. We've contributed to the regional missing slavery trafficking arrangement, MSET as it's called, and there'll be some join up with that going forward over the next year. And we've overseen some learning reviews and made sure that even in the context of COVID, that dissemination of the lessons learned have taken place. So that's been done virtually through ongoing training and learning, and building it into the safeguarding training programs for staff. So I know the priorities that we had were around early help, neglect, working with fathers, voice of the child, domestic abuse. Those had been our priorities for the past couple of years, and we have made sufficient progress to look at going forward some new priorities. However, we still have a way to go with neglect, because that is still the major, if you like, cause of children requiring child protection plans. So we need to drill down and get underneath the skin of that, really, and we're I've asked them, the IROs, to do an audit to find out actually what is it about neglect that we need to really focus on, and because that's a big heading, if you like. Domestic violence, again, that was one of the things we're watching very closely over last year, which you'll all be aware is something of potential concern. The police have been really helpful in terms of feeding back on that. In fact, it feels as though it is a big, of course it is a big issue and a possible hidden issue. However, the police feel that the numbers haven't gone up sufficiently. However, and this is anecdotal, there is some indication that the seriousness of the domestic abuse has increased over the lockdown periods. So that's something we're going to continue to keep an eye on, insofar as it affects children and the family. So that will remain a priority, as will neglect over the next year. So we've had, I think there's been 4 practice reviews over the period, which we've used, as I say, have been built into the training going forward. And how, I suppose the question is, how do we know whether our partnership has been effective? And there's been a number of external inspections which help us to sort of get under the skin of whether we're doing a good job or